Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 3 of my 2001 Eva Pod commission build. The last time I showed you kind of working on the light boxes and getting them honed in. So on this particular part, I'm going to go ahead and get those permanently attached onto the left side wraparound. I'm also going to be putting on the decals from the kit and using some aftermarket parts from Paragraphics to put down some decals for the buttons and also for the displays on this particular side, and using one of the sheets that Paragraphic makes that has several different images of the displays that you can cut out and backlight, some backlight film. So let's go ahead and take a look at the progress. All right, so I had only tacked on the light boxes initially to kind of look at the effect. So I'm getting ready to glue them down permanently, get some flat black on them to keep the light nice and contained. So the first thing I did was I took some CA glue, and I used this particular one, which is odorless, which is really good, super gold. And then I use an accelerant, Instaset accelerator, in order to harden it quickly. So all I do is I put some on a piece of cardboard with a toothpick, and I dab it around the different parts, and then use the kicker to harden it right away. That's the easiest way to go. If I needed to, it could be removed, but I don't think I'll need to. Once I get these glues down, it'd be kind of hard to do anyway. So I went ahead and glued all of them down. And I was thinking about, previously I was doing some flat black painting on them before I glued them down, but I think what I'm going to do is to get a nice plastic to plastic seal. I'm going to glue them onto the kit first, and then I can easily mask around the edge and just spray flat black over the entire thing. And the purpose of that is that, think of this as think of light as water. If you had a water pipe and you were seeing some water coming out of a little pinhole, you would have a leak. And it's the same thing here. If you can see light coming out of the back because this is translucent white plastic, then at least a little bit of the intensity of that light is leaking. It's escaping out via the plastic because it's translucent. So if you paint it black on the back, and it's white on the inside already, so that'll still give it reflective properties. If you paint the back of it black, it will further contain the light, and you can actually see a little bit of a difference, a significant difference in the brightness of it, so it helps to contain it and just have all the light coming forward out through the kit part where you want it to be. And of course, the other parts are flat black, so it's not going to come through the walls of it, it's only going to come through the buttons. So that's kind of the idea, to keep that nice and lightly as well. All right, once I get those on, then I can go ahead and seal around them with 5-minute epoxy. I'm just going to use some regular Bonding Plastruct. And again, since I'm just doing styrene plastic to styrene plastic, or whatever kind of plastic it is, I don't have to worry about using super glue or 5-minute epoxy or anything else. It's going to do what I want it to do. But once I get it on there, excuse me, any significant holes and gaps, I like to use 5-minute epoxy because it's thicker, obviously, and it's going to seal it better. So, all right. And then what I came up with, and I'm going to try out, is I got these circuit boards from Amazon, and they're just plain circuit boards. You can see on the back you have 5 of them that are already soldered together, and I could solder more than one of these rows together, and they have a little hole through it. So what I want to do is I want to avoid having a whole bunch of wires from all these twisted together. That's where you tend to get a wire break because there's too many. So what I'm going to do is, once I get them glued in place, each of these wires I'm going to go ahead and solder into, well, half of a circuit board. I see I cut this one in half, and I have, let's see if I have the other ones. I got several of them. There's 6 of them, which is kind of, I think is 6. I believe believe so. Yeah, there's different colors. It doesn't matter. I'm not color coding them, but I figure I can cut in half each of these and get 2, so that'll give me 12. I don't need even the whole board. I could even really cut it in half again. I'm not going to use all those holes. But what I'll do is I'll have the I'll have one for positive, one for negative, and I'll just bring in the wires and solder them into those and just take it all through it. So in the end, I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So obviously I'll need to do more than one of these rows. You can see that's only 5. So what I could do is I could have the first 2 being the positive. I can skip down a couple and have another 2 be the negative. And again, as long as they're not touching, and as long as I don't let the solder go between the 2 rows, then that'll be a nice connection. And then once I'm done with that, this will be glued on the back of this one section with one set of wires glued or soldered into it, one positive, one negative. So one set of leads coming off of this whole wraparound, and then one off of the right wraparound and one off of the bottom. Then I'll only have 3 wires. And likewise, I can put those into a circuit board for easy soldering and run in the lights from like the headlights or other things like that. So, okay. All right, so I've attached most of the light boxes onto the kit, as I had said. I started using 5-minute epoxy to seal in like that hole right there at the edge, that one up there as well. Now, I also used, there were some issues with certain areas where I was not getting light, like these 2 ends of this one, these 2 little ones right here. Also, there's a yellow one right there in the corner of this. It's right over there in the edge that I wasn't getting enough light to. So I'm also augmenting some of these light boxes with some extra either chip or mega SMDs. So I did get these ones from Evan Designs, and these are 4 cool white chip that are all wired together in one set, so they only have 2 leads coming off of them. I did want to get some mega ones like this. I forgot to order those for that, but I may do that in the future and make it just a little bit brighter. But these are working just fine. So what I did with this one, and you can see here it is right here. So I had 4 of them. Initially I was going to do 1 in each end and then 1, 2 right there, but I ended up putting 1 down into here and into this little corner that would fill out that area because there's no light coming. It's not bright enough right there. I put 1 down inside of this, and then I put those 2 right there. And then I covered those in 5-minute epoxy. I'm not going to put a light box in that part right there. It's easier just to cover in 5-minute epoxy. And then I'll end up putting some white paint over that and then paint black over the whole thing when I'm done. So I still have to put another light over here. And I'm still trying to figure out how to make this one work, mainly because these 3 bottom lights, you can see right there, and there's one over here. Because they're so close to the edge, it's really hard to get light strips that close that are going to illuminate those. So I'm getting these big ones at the top illuminated pretty well. I'm just having a hard time getting those bottom ones. So I'm still kind of working out how I'm going to do that. And then once I get that one complete, I can get it glued in place as well. These 2 here were kind of short in wires, so I soldered them together, as you can see. I'll end up gluing this down onto this once I get it ready to go. And then I'm also going to continue to use 5-minute epoxy to seal in like the ends over here, right over here, whatever I end up doing with this, that kind of thing, so that I keep everything nice and sealed. And then once it's all done, I can do a flat black over the entire back of this to light block that. So, all right. All right, so now that I'm getting these glued into place and getting ready to wire them together, I'm going to go ahead and start using the circuit boards that I got. And I cut down a piece to be small enough that it has enough leads that I want, but it doesn't have to be really big, that whole piece, because I'm only going to be wiring in maybe, I would say 6 or 7 separate leads. So what I did first of all is I took some magnet wire, try to get focus here, and I'm going to be using the first 2 rows on this side and skip a row, and then the other 2 rows. Let me get closer on that. Sorry. Okay. So if you look at the numbers, 1 and 2 are going to be the negative. There's the green. 3 is skipped, and 4 and 5 are going to be the positive. Now, since I did them at the bottom, that leaves me 8 to use for each one, because remember, there's a positive and negative for each of these sets of wires. So I just have to have 1 positive over on this side, or 1 negative, I mean, 1 positive over on this row, these 2 rows, and then they're going to connect together. And what I did was I took the wire and I poked it through one of the holes and took it over to the other side, and then I soldered them all together so they're connected. And you can see that the rows themselves are connected on this side here. So anything that I put in either of this row 1 and 2 is going to be connected into a negative, and 4 and 5 are going to be connected into a positive. So once I get these wires, the rest of these put on, I'm going to go ahead and attach this onto this part right here, and I'm going to put something under it so it stands up a little bit, and then I can just go ahead and wire each of these wires, solder down into that. It'll be easier to do once that's attached onto here. So all right, so one more thing I wanted to show you before I start wiring these into the circuit board is that to get these lights to show up at the very bottom, these controls, those bottom 3, because I wasn't getting enough light to come through. The top ones are fine when I put a light strip over that, and I still have to continue to put a light strip over this. I haven't attached that yet. What I did was, that wire's in the way, I took another one of these ones that are the 4 chip SMDs wired together, and I used some 5-minute epoxy, and I glued them down right over top of where the buttons are and covered them entirely. Now, the one in the front there, I started to paint white as I wanted to show you, because these 3 and then these 2 up here, and then like this one over here is also a single chip. This one up here is a single chip. So what I'm doing is, because I'm going to spray black over all of this, I went ahead and I'm going to put white paint. I'll finish painting these ones as well, and these 2 with white paint. That way white reflects the light, so it reflects out through the control, and then the black will then block the light in, so it will only go out through the controls as well. So let me go ahead and turn that on, and I'll show you how those 3 switches are going to look. Right, there you go. So you can see those 3 switches are nice and bright. You're getting a little bit of light spill and just light from the back of those other switches above them. But those will have their own ones in it. But those ones are the ones that are more of a warm white as opposed to a yellow, so they stand out a lot more than the rest of the ones on there. You can also see those white ones up there are lighting up nicely. They're not perfect. It's really hard to get like that one above the one there. It isn't as bright, but some of that blue will spill over once I get those on as well. And then that one will also light up that way too. So, okay. All right, good. So once I get those all done and get those painted over, and then do this last light box, and I also want to get this glued down onto this light box so it's not in the way. Then I'm ready to go ahead and get the circuit board glued into this area, and then start wiring all of this, trimming off the edges, the ends, making them shorter, getting them all wired together into one circuit board with one lead coming out, and then we'll finish all the lighting on this wraparound section. All right, so I finished the light boxes, as I showed in my previous still. For this last one right here, the one that has to be closer, since I already had the single SMDs that were lighting those lower buttons, I just needed to light the upper ones. So I took a piece of styrene sheet that fits in that space. You can see how it's angled down in the back. and I glued the one section of the SMDs onto it, and then I angled it down into the back because that's where the light needs to be concentrated. Glued it in place, and then I just took some 5-minute epoxy and I put it all around it. Because I don't really need to have a completed light box around that. Just like I did on these other ones, I'm going to paint that white. Sorry, the wire's loose and flickering in front of the camera. And then this whole back is going to be painted flat black once I get the circuit board on and the wiring in place. I also glued down those 2 wires there that I soldered together into one single strand. All right. And I filled in that spot right there with 5-minute epoxy on the end. Sorry again for the flickering. Filled in that one over there and all these other places. So the whole thing is now sealed in place. And I'm ready to go ahead and get the piece of circuit board glued onto right here. And then I can go ahead and get all of these wires trimmed down and then soldered into that circuit board so I have one set of leads coming out of this sub-assembly. All right, and here is the completed wiring in the back on the circuit board. So not pretty, but it's my first attempt, and it's functional and definitely a lot more stable than having all of these wires twisted together with a possible break. This way they're nicely soldered into this circuit board, and then the rest of these I'm going to put some glue over them at some point and tuck them in some more to keep them nice and flush. But all in all, it's very streamlined. It's not a very protruding type of lighting. Let me turn it over this way. All right, so let me go ahead and plug it in and show you how that's going to look. All right, there we go. Now I just cut out some of the display cells. They're not in there completely, and you can obviously see some light around them, but just to kind of give you an idea. And if I pull the camera away, you get a really bright hot spot on that, but it's really not there. It looks like that. All right, and so there's all the buttons lit up. You got your brighter, warm white looking ones there at the bottom. You got your blue at the top, a little bit of white. And really, they all look like they're lit up, so they're not bad. And the camera definitely does wash out some of this, and it makes more hot spots look visible. But all in all, it's looking pretty cool. Now I'm actually running this at 9 volts instead of the 12 volts, which I think is actually probably going to work just fine. It's a lot cooler, it's not very warm. And when you get the light boxes on there, I still haven't painted the back flat black, which is going to probably add just a little bit more brightness to it. So I think 9 volts would be fine. I mean, they're all very, very bright, and in person too. So I think that's going to be perfect. All right, so now that this whole section's wired up, what I want to do next is I'm going to go ahead and put on the decals just on this section. And that includes the paragraphic button decals, just to get an idea of how that's going to look. So that's what I'm going to be working on here next. All right, so I went ahead and removed the magnet wire that was going into the circuit board, and I put on a thicker wire to give it a little more of a fortification. And then I got a flat black coating over the entire back, as I was saying about light blocking it. All right, so this is all complete as of right now. So let me go ahead and start working on the decals from the kit. All right, so I began applying the decals, and originally I'd watched the video from Lou Del Masso when he was doing his, and he basically said the same thing that I'm having to do here. You have to do a lot of trimming. So you can see there at the top, some of those lines don't come all the way through. They're just not designed to go through those gaps correctly. but I have the words there and the things pointing to the controls. These ones here especially were difficult. You can see what the glossy part is. And I didn't put anything in those top buttons because, quite frankly, there was nothing there. It was just a hole in the black. There wasn't any white outline. These ones here weren't too bad. Now, I did cut out the yellow parts because the rest were just red. And when I have the red behind it, it glows red, so you can just see the yellow. It works that way. This one's a little bit choppy at the top, you can see, but unfortunately, that one couldn't be helped, because what happens is even the little teeny holes that are openings are not fully open. There's a bit of carrier film. So you got to take your X-Acto knife, a really sharp blade, and just cut in between those to really open those up, which I'm doing on these other ones on this side piece. And you see I chopped them up into little bits because I don't need the entire big panel. It's really just not necessary, and it's really hard to try to control, use for control, really hard to deal with and put over those little buttons. That top piece I cut off separately and just stuck it up on there. And then I'm going to end up going over these, well, first of all, with some Walther's Solvaset to let them lay down pretty good. And then I'm going to probably put a flat coat over top, so get rid of that gloss. All right. All right, so I have all the decals put down except for this panel here, which goes over top of the displays. So let me kind of show you. So those ones there turned out the best because I cut out those openings for the buttons so they would rest over them a lot easier. And like I said, they do have it open. Let me show you on this one here. So there is actually a spot between where all the controls go, but you can see what I did was I took an X-Acto knife and I cut around. It even came through kind of the paper. Because what happens then is when I put it down, it fits over top of the buttons a lot easier because they're just quite not big enough to go over those buttons, which they just slightly off. And so if you cut around it, just basically use your X-Acto to cut around the bluish part and just leave the black part intact. And then of course, like I said, I cut around this so I just have the right piece. I found that it was easier to keep that together for this whole section right here. And again, only this part over here is going over this one button because it has a white outline. There's nothing over these ones, so there's no point in keeping that part on there. It would just be just a piece of black like this. It's just useless, other than wallpapering the entire piece. So before I put that last one down, I'm trying to mulling over how I want to do this, but I want to put down the displays. I'm going to use these two right here. And these are ones I've gotten from Paragraphics. And I find these are the best ones because they're oversized just a little bit. I had to do some very slight trimming, but they fit right over top of those square openings. Now, I guess the idea is you're supposed to use the clear insert, and that has a bit of an edge around it, but then you're either going to have a light leak coming around it, or you're going to have to really paint over that a lot to get that to not have light coming through. So instead, I just have vellum paper behind this, double layered, to diffuse the light. And then once these go over top of it, they will just glow the right look. But they're just slightly oversized from those openings. So what I'm thinking of doing, because I've tried several things with some test pieces and very little glue wants to stick to these, even though they are like a clear plastic. You can't get your normal glues, you can't even get CA glue to stick to it. So I figured the best bet is to use some 5-minute epoxy and just put the very slightest little bit around the edges of these, not down inside of course, where it overlaps, because it pretty much sticks to anything hopefully, and it's a lot thicker. And then gently stick these over top of it, trying not to get any on the inside part where the light's going to shine through. And then what these will do is these will overlap that whole piece and just meet in the middle where that middle strip is. And so there will not be any light leak around them. You'll see only the part glowing through. The very slightest edge of these will overlap on the black, but it won't matter. You're not going to see them. And when it's lit up, all you're going to see are the displays, and they're going to look correct and not have any kind of a light leaking around them. So I want to get those glued down first before I put down these, since these little mini, again, it's going to be super delicate. These are going to go over top of it and cover up, which will also help to cover up the edge around them, so it a little better hides them in there. So, all right, so let me see about getting these glued down onto the kit first. All right, and there are the two displays glued on, and they look kind of rough. But again, the this last decal, which I'm going to put on now, has this framework right here that first of all goes around it and also goes in between it. So that should sufficiently block that off, so you're not going to see it. So let me go ahead and get this applied, and that'll be the end of the decals from the kit. And then I'm going to start working on the button decals. All right, so I finished the displays and the decals around those displays, all the decals on this section actually. And I've started putting on the little button decals. Now, they have some value and they certainly look good in certain places, but they're kind of designed, I believe, to go over a painted button. Now the problem is, obviously, I'm using the color behind it to shine through, so I didn't paint the buttons themselves with the clear Tamiya's, which they recommend. I don't know if these would show up any better, but some of them are white backed, from what I can tell, for the blue buttons at least, maybe the red. You can barely see them there when I put the light on them. Others are black. The black ones are actually pretty cool, and there's quite a few of those. So those are showing up a lot better on it, especially when you put the light on it. And I'll show you here. So I did that top panel, which you can barely make out the white lettering. You can make out the black ones there in the end a lot easier. And over here, sorry, let me get a little closer. And they are really tiny. They are really, really tiny, which is fine. I think ultimately they're going to add some busy detail to this, but you're not going to see them distinctly as much. The words from the actual decals for the kit, you can see hertz at 2.5 hertz. Those are pretty good, easy to see. And some of those you can see as well. I didn't put any on those yet. I did do these ones. Oh, I can see it now with the camera. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, but my goodness, you cannot make those off. They look like the barest specks. And that little white one there too. These ones here on the bottom, you can see a whole lot better because they're all black and they're with the warm white backing. And then there's some white ones right there. Let me go ahead and turn on the light, and I'll show you how they look. Now, I'm going to let you know, now this is my first attempt, so some mistakes were made, but they can be fixed. So when I glued on the 5-minute epoxy to those displays, that worked just fine. And then those decals, you can see that blue border went over it nicely. It's a little raised, you can see there where it's over top of the 5-minute epoxy, but you're not going to see that because the whole background is black. And when these lights are on, it's not going to show. However, I got a little bit of epoxy. I tried to do too much at once, so I added some on the bottom of that DMG one there. And then some kind of spilled over, so I chipped it off, and it chipped off the paint too. So there's a little bit of light showing through there, which I'm going to try to get some fine color paints that match it and match it up. So just to let you know, but let me go ahead and turn the light on and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so again, still magnified, so it's going to be quite a bit shaky. Let me try to sit it down, but I have to angle it, sorry. All right, so those ones there you can see pretty visibly. Now again, when you get too close, it looks like a hot spot, but those are actually white on the end and more blue in the middle. The white ones, you can definitely see the black better. There you can make out the blue ones a little bit more. And the camera does tend to wash it out a little bit more, but they are more visible. See what I meant about those ones there? You would have to really use a magnifying thing to see that that's a 1, 2, 3, 4. That is so faint. And that one there, channel 3. Actually, I can make it out with the camera. These ones look pretty good because they're black with the background of the yellow, the warm white. I think the yellow ones and the green ones are going to turn out a whole lot better. There's the blue ones. So yeah, I mean, I can read them. Vertical hold, contrast. Sorry for the shakiness. I didn't put any on those other rows yet. So they just add the faintest view of some detail on the buttons. There's that little piece I messed up on there, which I can try to patch up that I mentioned. But other than that, the displays worked out great. The concept is sound and I like it, so I'm gonna complete that on the other sections and repeat the process on the commission build. So that's the beauty of me starting with the one that I'm going to end up keeping, because mistakes that I make I can live with, but I don't want there to be any obvious mistakes on the commission one. And again, those get washed out, but that's how they look when you get closer, which looks really good. It's a nice even lighting, no hot spots. I picked these two particular ones. I just thought they were kind of cool. I like them. And of course, I'll have some other ones on the other sides. There's the red, which is kind of cool. All right. So I'm thinking the yellow ones are going to show up the best, the green ones as well. I'm not sure if the red ones have the black ones. I'll have to see. But the blue ones are going to be a little harder to see. But I think they will add some detail and make it look a little more realistic. So, all right. All right, so I did one more test just to kind of see if it might make a difference and it might change it. Because in the instructions, they recommend that you use Tamiya clear paints, which I use quite often, to paint the buttons, the tops of them. And they obviously recommend blue, green, yellow, red. And so I thought, well, maybe that's the issue because I'm putting the decals over actually just the plastic and the light's coming through. It's showing it differently. So I went ahead and I painted clear blue on this one over here, and which I really don't want to do for a couple reasons. One, you can see it when the lights are not on, but it's really hard to get an even coating of the clear Tamiyas on top unless you mask it all off and maybe airbrush it or something, which is definitely a hassle if you want to do all these buttons. I have seen I believe Lou Dalmasso, when he did his, he painted the back. So instead of using the clear overlays like I've been doing, he painted underneath, which would probably also work because you can get a nice clear even coating. But if you brush it on like I did, it's really hard to do. So I let it dry and I put the decals on. So if you don't turn the lights on, you can see the white against the darker blue. And you can definitely make out that there's words there. But that kind of defeats the purpose of putting words onto buttons. I mean, if you just wanted to paint these to look like the colors but not light it up, then these would be perfect. These would be fine. But let me show you. So I just taped some lights underneath. So if I turn the lights on, and they're kind of bright, it's not the proper normal brightness, but let me get it in close so it, sorry. All right, it's hard to get a good image of it, but the problem is that the light is patchy coming through the blue. I would have to put it on pretty thickly in order to do that, and then it's going to affect the color of the blue. In real life, it's still really hard to make out the words. So just in general, it's the fact that they light up that I think just kind of washes away the white lettering. So I don't want to talk negatively about these because I think the concept is good, and I think they really did invest the time in order to make them accurate, because I'm assuming they made some of them white because they are white in the film. That's what I'm guessing. But I think a way to improve this would be a couple of things. One, make them all black, with the assumption that you're going to put these on over lights. So white is just going to be faded out when you put it over top of it. Secondly, make them just a little bit larger so they're a little easier to see. Now some of them, like these, aren't too bad. I'm sure that they're accurately sized, but if they were black, it would be better, certainly. Some of the other ones that are, like I've shown, that like 1, 2, 3, they're way too small. You're not really going to see them. So I like the idea, I like the concept. I think they really could add to the detail, but I think definitely the colors of them being changed would be a huge help. All right, so I have all of the button decals on this panel, on this section. So again, if you look closely, let me move it in a little bit. You can make out that there are some white lettering on some of these buttons. And the ones down here, these ones over here. Let me go ahead and turn it on and I'll show you how it looks with the lights on. All right, and there's with the lights on. So you definitely lose the effect on the blue buttons. You can make it out just a little bit if you look closer, but it's the white lettering that's the problem. That takes away from your ability to see it. The black ones look fine, and those would be great. So I would really love to see a set of these with just all black numbers or letters and none of the white. They would look fine over top of, you know, a black background, like the lettering there that you can see from the kit. Those look great, and they're larger as well. So even if they weren't larger, I think the size is probably okay, but really, if they were all black lettering, it would really add to this a whole lot more and give you more of that detail. It does definitely give you some cool looking effect down there on the yellow buttons, or the off-white ones, the warm white. So those look good. But otherwise, I don't really think it adds much to it. You really can't see them, the white against the buttons that are lit up. All right, so that's going to wrap up the video for this week. Definitely making some progress on my research and development. So this week, since I've already honed in the light boxes and got them attached, I was struggling with the decals from the kit and the aftermarket parts. And I think I've gotten those down to where I know the tricks of getting them cut to the right sizes and put on. So I'll be able to do that a little more effectively on the rest of the kit and on the commission build that I'm doing as well. So I'm really happy with the Pair Graphics backlight films. I think they're really excellent, and I'll definitely be using those for the rest of the displays. The button controls, I'm going to use them on this one, and I'm going to continue to put on. It's definitely the ones that have the black numbers. I think they really add some detail to it. I'm not as happy with the white back one, so I'm not sure if I'll go through the work to put those on as well. But definitely they have some value on there as well. So thank you to all my new subscribers, and stay tuned.